Morning, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the globe. Appreciate your attendance today. My name is Gil Schreutman. I'm the Senior Product Manager for Arbortext here at PTC. And in today's webinar, I'm going to walk you through some of the new enhancements that came out in the last 3 CPSs that we introduced for 7.2 throughout the last year. We'll start with some roadmap overview of where we are in the timeline. So we introduced the first 7.2 F000 release back in December 21. And on top of that, we kind of tried to introduce a CPS to build it up with an additional CPS with additional enhancements and improvement roughly every quarter, more or less. That's the intended cadence at least. So we've introduced 7.2.0.1 back in May 22, 7.2.0.2 in October 22, and the last latest available in the market right now is 7.2.0.3 that was just released by end of March this year. And the next CPS that's coming up is going to be 7.2.0.4 with some improvements that are highlighted here in green, and later throughout the year will be planning another CPS as well as 7.2.1. That's the kind of most significant release vehicle that we are planning that will be released towards the early 24 or Q2 24 timeframe. So this is where we are in terms of the last 7.2 CPSs, and again, in terms of what's new in 7.2 as compared to maybe some of you might have already known or familiar with earlier 7.1 or even 6.4. We kind of positioned that release to be our long-term release, and we continue to build it up with additional, making it more robust, scalable, and secured infrastructure, hopefully with much lower total cost of ownership. So starting with some of the deployment configuration that was refined in this release, so in order to meet the high availability market demands and to make sure that the system is going to be available irrespective of any possible failures in terms of loading or server shutdowns or anything of that kind. Its infrastructure has been extracted, or basically we've extracted all the third-party component like the Java, JDK, Wirefly, as well as the database. So we have one piece to accomplish with MongoDB, but everything else has been externalized so that you could continuously update those components independently of ACD update. That's quite critical nowadays with meeting the security ongoing demands and making sure that your system is protected against any possible vulnerability, as well as allowing you to just reduce the cost of the ownership of your deployment with some of the alternative JDK options that we introduced with Amazon Corretto 11, for example, alternative to Java. In terms of the LDAP, we have introduced a replacement for the old Windshield DS component that was there before, and we are now bundling or providing an option with OpenDJ. That's an open source alternative, but we are also compatible with any possible alternative LDAP that you might choose to configure and use with ACD. Definitely the enterprise LDAP that each one of you customers use in your corporate environment. So we try to just be compatible and make sure it's flexible enough to support any of those type. In terms of single sign-on improvements, we've brought our out-of-the-box offering up to speed with Ping Federate 11 support that was done in earlier CPS. And we also, in the last CPS 0.3, introduced some configuration option that will allow you to exclude some of the admin-related applications like the administration utility or the task manager from the SSO configuration to make sure it won't be accessible, obviously, in any case by any end user or will be restricted to a very limited set of people outside of the SSO configuration umbrella. In the last 7.2.0.3, we also introduced some improvements around offline, and some we tried at least to make the viewer a lot more interactive or easy to use with some, especially with respect to our mobile viewport support. So it's an ongoing demand. We're trying to keep up with the demand for additional viewports and mobile devices options. And with 7.2.0.2, we actually meet that bar and now supporting any type of viewport or device range between 360 pixels to 750, quite a significant range. And we continue to evolve and improve this in the future as well. And last but not the least, we also introduced some improvements around our TAL segmentation, data transformation and loading monitoring tool that will help you ongoing monitor closely the status of your repository, the data repository, and give you enough heads up in terms of when you need to reevaluate, breaking down certain segments or automatically reindex to achieve better search performance. And lastly on that list is the ACD Analytics tool that we introduced first as a kind of POC, and we are also kind of bringing it up to speed with some critical improvements in the 7.2.0.4 as well. So that's from an high-level overview perspective. Now I would like to deep dive into each one of those highlights that I mentioned, and starting with the infrastructure or the recommended deployment architecture. As I mentioned, we kind of recommend all our customers to stick with a multi-site deployment configuration. This will guarantee the most optimized and highly available deployment to serve the demand in that area. And what that means basically is that each viewer will have to be set up on a different site configuration or a different tab that it's made available through the deployment configurator tool that we introduced for simplifying the configuration task of your deployment. You also need to make sure there is obviously one core server and one core CMI associated with every site, so there is no longer a need to set up this core load balancer and two cores for each site or for each viewer. That's no longer needed. We kind of make this deployment a lot more efficient and easier to handle with less components in the mix. And lastly, the database schema. It's important to set up a database E3C database schema for each one of the sites. Again, from the perspective of achieving high availability in your deployment. And on top of everything, that's something that was there before, but it's critical, especially when it comes to multi-site deployment. You need to make sure that the corporate load balancer is configured to efficiently switch between the sites or the viewer in each site in order to channel your end user viewer application end users to the primary viewer that they need to access in order to get access to deliver the content. So that's in high level, and this is a kind of visual of how we expect the typical deployment configuration to look like. And I'm talking about mid-size deployments, so typically 2 sites and another site for preview. This is really critical to have as well in order to have some kind of check or validation of the content that's being loaded before you publish it forward to runtime and make it available to the broader end users community. And we've seen some customers that aren't necessarily following that practice, but I would like to emphasize that this is, again, something that we strongly recommend on having in each deployment, even if that's the smallest or not really, you don't really see the value, but it definitely pays off when it comes to adopting those practices on an ongoing basis to avoid that your end users are exposed to the most accurate and correct information that you intend to publish out through Arbortext content delivery. Next, and this is again has been our focus in the 7.2.0.3 release. We have introduced or kind of brought our offline offering up to speed, so that any content that's been available or accessible to through the web application, it couldn't be now deployed and accessed by end user technicians while working offline. So this requirement is still valid, and we are trying to further evolve this to meet also the ongoing mobile device needs, and we'll definitely touch base on that in the future. And in terms of some of the improvements that we introduced in this area. So first and foremost, we introduced a silent installer to allow customers to automatically persist or basically deploy the software, offline software from remote. So this is critical when it comes to offline technicians that they need to have the setup handled or controlled from remote. We introduced a flow that will allow you to also push software updates, as well as whether if those kind of CPSs that we regularly introduce every quarter, or some customization updates that you might want to push forward and distribute throughout your offline deployment community. So this process will allow you to do that now seamlessly and as automatic in automatic fashion as possible. We have improved the synchronization processes between the web and offline, so that every update you now apply on the web admin utility in terms of preferences updates, we have now improved that sync mechanism to be able to just push those updates to the offline and be available seamlessly without any user intervention. So it's completely automatic. In terms of the content loading, that's also something that we've kind of revolutionized. The data flow that used to be there before was, very, manually driven and very hard to follow, especially from customers' perspective that would like to make sure that the most accurate and complete set of updates are being pushed out to the offline technicians. So we have improved that control from the customer side and made this entire data flow automatic, so that you could easily control what content gets into your offline technician based on the profile definitions as seamlessly as possible, without any need for them to do anything. They just need to log into the web while they are from the offline system, and the updates will just be distributed and then loaded into the offline system at the point of that they find most convenient. So they still have an option, for example, if that loading content into the system still requires downtime. So that's why we introduced an option for them to kind of reschedule or postpone the loading process. For example, in this case, it's postponing by 2 hours. That's the out-of-the-box default configuration, but you might as well change that. But this will allow them to determine what's the best, time for them to pick up those updates and load those into the system. So a lot more streamlined flow around data loading for offline. We also introduced an option to delete content from the offline deployment in case you're switching between dealerships, or you don't want certain content to be made available just to free up your hard drive, hard disk space, or anything of that kind. You can just clean up and start from scratch, and also determine what content you would like to load and deliver to your offline environment. And lastly, we also introduced some another important improvement to allow generic non-product related content to be available for offline. So it's been streamlined through the data load processes as well. Next improvement, as I mentioned, we have significantly improved the data segmentation, or the way that ACD handles the data in the system. So we regularly index the content. So we introduced some automatic reindexing process that makes the incremental or the search, make sure that the search remains efficient with any incremental data load. So this is very, very important to enforce or control on an ongoing basis. And we have also introduced another important monitoring tool that will allow you to continuously evaluate the health status of your data repository for each segment. And when it reaches certain threshold, which is defined as 80% occupancy, we also raise a flag. The system raises a flag or send an email to let you know that this specific segment or repository needs to be broken down into smaller pieces to achieve better performance. And again, in 7.2.0.4, we're introducing, in 7.2.0.3, we just introduced some improvements around that, or that flag will be introduced for the specific segment that's currently being loaded as part of the transform and load task. But in 7.2.0.4, we're also expanding it on a much broader system level and providing that kind of report or bar chart that you see at the bottom here that will be introduced through the ACD Analytics reports package. And I'll talk about a little more about that in the subsequent demo that I've planned for today. And there will be also an email notification that will be sent programmatically to the system admin to let them know that this specific segment is reaching its limit and needs to be broken down. As I just mentioned, in terms of the reporting or analytics capabilities of ACD, we've introduced back in 7.2 F0.0.0 some a way for you to generate kind of ad hoc reports that pull out useful information about how many users, or kind of usage analytics, how many users are using the system at any given point in time. It will helps you identify peak versus off-peak hours, or closely monitor the amount of sessions that are being opened over time, idle users that possibly needs to be removed from your Active Directory, and so on and so forth. And data analytics, that's another category that we touched in that report set, with help you provide some key insights around what content, types of content, and also the volumes that are loaded into the system. So typical things like how many part lists you have in the system, how many parts, distribution across different product models, serial numbers, etc. It's all being captured in that report set. And lastly, some insights around sales analytics that allows you to monitor how many parts are being ordered over time, grouped by segments or product models, top order parts, and things like that. So very useful. And I'll cover more on that side on the demo that I planned for today. So bear with me here. Another important kind of improvement that came through 7.2 was the ability to add the entire part list to a shopping cart. So it's all it does, it's kind of a shortcut option that allow you to add the entire parts list with the quantities defined. So you can go and change the quantities out of the box or the default quantities that are provided. And then once done, click on that add entire part list to the shopping cart, that button that's available on the upper right corner here, to add the entire part list to your cart, and also considers the system configuration in terms of either whether if you have a preferred part configuration or non-preferred, and allows the end user to also determine how to handle those cases on a future basis. So if they want to add the explicit part that's been requested here as per the auto state, or only the preferred part that were identified by your organization to be ordered. So the end users have that flexibility to determine what types of parts they would like to add. Next is another improvement that we have the 3D viewer or the PvZ WebGL Viewer bundle within ACD that allows you to visualize 3D illustrations without the need of any plugin, and we continuously evolve and bring or update this WebGL component. And one of the improvements that made through the last version of 7.2 was the introduction of the transform feature that allows you to detach a certain part from the assembly and just move it around to get a better view of the geometry. So that's made through 7.2 full release, I believe. And we're continuously making sure that this version is up to date with the latest and greatest improvements around 3D visualization. So with that, I would like to jump to some of the pieces I wanted to demonstrate for you today. So starting with maybe some of the offline capabilities that we introduced. This is, again, me logged into the offline system in my organization. So I just provided the login information for my offline, and this is the welcome page that I'm getting. Once I'm getting started here, you can see that there is a pop-up that says that software updates are available. So this is the software and customization update flow that we introduced that pushes out specific software out of the box or customization update to your offline deployments. And all that end users need to do is simply click on that download and trigger that. In order to generate those updates, I'll just skip through some of the how to make this available. So basically on the task manager, what you need to do is we introduced another task that's called create software update for offline. Once you, sorry about that, just logged out here. Okay. Once you click on that, you just need to provide the source folder path where you want the package to be uploaded from, and then you have an option to just select the site group. Currently, I'm only using preview here, but if in an actual product deployment, you'll have runtime site group where you can also publish this out. And once this is available, again, you will see in the admin utility, we have the download center that basically controls all the software, all the data packages previously that streamlined or should be distributed to the offline deployment. And now in 7.2.0.3, we also introduced another section that streamlines the software updates or the customization. So once you generate that package, this specific package will be made available in here in this section, and you can it will be made available for your offline deployments programmatically, so you don't need to do anything further. If needed, you can also download it directly from here and distribute manually. That's another option to distribute it out to your offline technicians. Next, and again, let's go back to the offline technician here, and now let's assume that I want to just browse through the system. I'm picking this in the Adventure 600 product, and it navigates me to the specific information structure, and I would like to just click on that part list in here. Now I would like to just order some parts from that list here. I can go ahead and click on that button here, and it will automatically load the entire parts that are listed here on the part list. If you just open with view, you can see that all of those parts have been added automatically. You can also, use the preview. So this is the 3D viewer that I was talking about, the WebGL. If you want to just, remove that seat from the assembly to further explore it using the transform feature that's made available, you can easily do that just by clicking on that option and moving it around to get a better view of where that needs to be, or to drill down into that assembly. Once you're finished and you would like to just place the order, you can go to the preview, go to checkout here, and from the cart shopping page, you can see that there is additional information. You can add here. One important thing that, as I mentioned, we've improved or automated the entire sync process for preferences as well as attributes. So if, for example, let me go back to this offline admin utility. If I am, again, from this attribute section, I would like to introduce another attribute for my shopping cart. Let's say that I just added one in here that says new attribute, but I can go ahead and add additional attribute. Like new attribute 2 or whatever that needs to be, shopping address or shipping address or billing address or whatever that needs to be. I'm applying it in here. And when I go back to the cart, I'm just going to refresh the page here. You see that this information, and again, I'm logged into the offline system right now. This attribute has been already added for me automatically, so I can type in whatever information is needed here that might be useful for the order placement, and then download, or if you have any custom integration to just send it out to some order placement or e-commerce system, this information will be sent across along with the parts information that's captured in that cart. And lastly, in terms of, this is covering the highlights that I mentioned in terms of the shopping cart enhancement, the preferences sync. One other important improvement that we made through 7.2.0.3, as I mentioned, is the ability to delete, or for users to determine what content they would like to keep or retain in their offline deployment. So if certain content is not useful anymore, so you can navigate to the synchronized page, and from the delete content dialog here, you can pick and choose whatever content you don't no longer need, and immediately delete it from here. And once this is done, I'm just going to just for that. It will be automatically deleted. You can always bring it back if you want. If that user want to add this back, it's still something that is entitled to based on this profile definition. So if at some point you want to add that snowblower that I just mentioned, deleted back to the system, you can add it back from that add content option, and it will be made available as before. Also wanted to show you some of the improvements that we introduced around the ACD reports. As I mentioned, this is the spreadsheet that we get from while generating the task manager task. That's also been introduced back in 7.2.0.2. We have, again, if you're talking about the task manager, so we have the generate ACD reports. This is another task that we introduced. It allows you to select the time frame for the report, export. You can also set a password so that the access to that spreadsheet will be restricted to a subset of people. And once you select the time frame, and also we also recommend to anonymize the personal information that comes out through that report. It possibly be the usernames and the emails of those usernames. We recommend you to anonymize to avoid any kind of GDPR issues later on or anything like that. And once this is generated, you get that report subset that filters based on the timeline that you selected. It provides by default those 3 tabs in here that says usage analytics, sales analysis, and data analysis. On the usage front, as I mentioned, you see useful information like how many active users you had daily in the system, the sessions, how many sessions you had over time, the peak versus off-peak hours, how many, what are the top end users, and things like that. On the sales front, it provides you with some useful insights around how many cards have been ordered, the breakdown of the top order or the orders by product groups, in this case models, and the top 10 ordered parts. And on the data analysis fronts, this is again going to be very useful for the system admins that continuously monitor the publishing processes and loading into ACD. It provides insights around how many types of information are loaded into the system at any given point in time, and what's the volume per each type. And we will further extend it, as I mentioned earlier, with additional important system level segments, else report that will continuously allow you to monitor what's the else status of each one of the segments, and also raise a flag or send you an email when certain segment needs to be broken down further into multiple. And on top of that, this spreadsheet contains additional information that's readily available for you. So if you unhide some of the tabs here that are made available, you can see additional tabs or reports that are made available that you could use for your specific needs and further customize to create the desired report that are needed in your organization. So one of the useful reports that made available here is the login details, for example, that contains the full breakdown of how many users logged in, when, and additional charts that we already previewed in the usage analysis. So very useful.
So maybe I'll take the time while maybe we wait, Gil, for any questions to come in. The next webinar that we have coming up is next week on Tuesday. Creo Illustrate 10.0 is here. I'm going to put in the chat the direct links. We will share the presentation as well, but I just wanted to give some visibility to this one. If you'd like to attend the next webinar, it is on June 27th. In addition, we are also encouraging everyone in our Arbortext community to stay connected. The best way is to follow us on YouTube. We regularly post new content there. Release webinars, this release webinar will be there as well. The community is a great place for tips and tricks and to really engage with other peers, ask questions. It's a great resource, as well as LinkedIn to keep connected with us from a social perspective, events and things we are engaged with. We just wrapped up a couple of events in Europe last week, in Munich and South France. So if you want to just stay connected more to the Arbortext business unit and the things that are going on and things how you can get more involved and connected with the community, these are great resources. And lastly, if you missed LiveWorks, there is on-demand content now available. This is the link you can follow on the bottom here. But Arbortext was very much part of that service, the SLM, the new SLM vision at PTC with the acquisition of ServiceMax. So you can see some of the on-demand content for LiveWorks now and how, you know, Arbortext fits into that bigger SLM vision. So I do encourage you to look at some of that content. Jim Heppelman delivered a great keynote. We had a great keynote by Neil on SLM. So I do encourage you to check that out. And back to the Q&A. Let's see if anything came through. If not, we can just wrap it up. One did just come through. So let me. So Sheree said, how to enable the auto monitoring feature for the segmentation strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I mentioned, it's we have some basic capabilities that were introduced in 7.2.0.3 that develop the version that's already in the market and available. You don't need to do anything special to enable it. It's going to be part of the transform and load task once you streamline content into the system and it reaches a certain limit specifically for that segment. It will raise a flag or send you an email about it. And it will be introduced through the task monitor. But as I mentioned in further along the lines in 7.2.0.4, the next CPS that's coming up will be introducing a much broader system level monitoring capability for that. It will be introduced in the ACD analytics report package that I mentioned. So from customers configuration perspective, you don't need to do anything. It's automatically enabled out of the box. I hope that helps clarify things.
Great. All right, that might be all for questions then, Gil. I think we can probably wrap it up.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks everyone for joining. As Maya said, stay connected and make sure to reach out through the PTC community and our standard channel through YouTube or LinkedIn, email, whatever you find most comfortable. Looking forward to your feedback.